Hey guys, so today you're going to get a behind the scenes look at the latest CK Productions, a 3D animation, Among Us in first person. This is our second fully 3D animated film, the first being Pixel Pals, which we released last year. If you watch the behind the scenes for that, it was a similar process, but there were definitely different and new challenges that came with this one. First of all, to be totally clear, I didn't do any of the modeling for this video. The character and scene models were sourced from CG Trader and TurboSquid. Before we get started, as always, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe down below for behind the scenes videos, filmmaking topics, editing tutorials, and all that fun stuff twice a week. And with that, let's get started. So once I sourced all the models we needed, the first step was to build out the scenes in Cinema 4D. I used the various scene models to build out hallways, cafeterias, storage rooms, and other rooms that had to do with the game, and stitch them together to create a map to move about the ship. The second part, and the easiest part, was to next animate the main character. And with the main character being the camera, I didn't have to actually animate the main character. Using keyframes and a slight wiggle expression, I animated the camera to move throughout the scene, hitting all the main points and actions that needed to happen and timing them out appropriately so scenes wouldn't happen too fast or too slow. One of the biggest challenges I had, but actually was one of the most fun things I did, was animating the camera to fly out of the ship into space. I wanted to simulate the ejected character flying through space and seeing what they would see through their eyes. And that's basically what a lot of this film was about, seeing it through the character's eyes, and for this particular video, seeing it through a very bad imposter's eyes. The next step was to populate the scene with the other characters. When I first sourced this model, I was excited because it said it came pre-animated, but when I put it into Cinema 4D, it actually looked like this. So I had to rebuild the skeleton and animate them again. For the first part of the step, I didn't actually animate the character walking yet. I used simple keyframes to move them throughout the scenes to spots where they were supposed to go without animating them running. This was done to expedite the process a bit and make sure I was happy with where every character was landing for each angle. It was actually funny sometimes when a character would have to move to a farther part in the scene, I would do this really quick animation, moving it from one spot to another, but you never actually see that because it's not seen on camera. Then afterwards, I added all the walk cycles and the hats to the characters, and this was supposed to be quick and easy, but actually ended up being a pretty difficult process. Sometimes the character's legs would freak out and wouldn't animate correctly when copying and pasting keyframes, so I frequently had to animate them frame by frame over and over and over again. Also, since depth perception isn't quite the easiest of the camera angle in the setup, once test renders were done, I discovered many characters were actually floating off the ground when they were walking, and also several times the hats would eclipse the character's head, so naturally there are a lot of re-renders there. And speaking of re-renders, that brings us to texturing and lighting. A number of these scenes came with their own inherent lighting and textures, but a number of them also had to be textured and altered from scratch. There was also this one model that came with this bizarre huge sphere that impeded the other models, but for the longest time I couldn't figure out where it came from because it didn't show up on the editor's screen. It only showed up when I rendered it. There were also several scenes that didn't respond well to the softboxes I added for lighting, and they created very distracting dancing shadows, and this caused a lot of trial and error. Honestly, these little issues with the lighting, with the characters having animation errors, put me behind a couple of weeks on the schedule. When I got to this point, the full animation had already been done for about a month. Let alone there was a whole model I had to replace near the end because it was way too detailed and it would have taken way too long to render to texture all the layers that were included in the model. And on top of that was all the rendering in general. For the first scene, it took about 25 hours to render. It was only about 20 seconds long. The third scene was better. It only took about 13 hours. And the second scene, well, that one took about 129 hours. Plus with re-renders, corrections, and tests, the total render time was well past 200 hours. I remember basically leaving my computer to sit and render from Christmas to New Year's straight without stopping at all. Luckily, when you're rendering, you can get other stuff done in the background and on other devices, and that's where the After Effects portion came in. That's where I added all the HUD display effects and translated some of the options and screens from the game into what they would look like for a 3D animated sci-fi film. In the next video, I'm going to do a full breakdown of how I made these animated graphics and some good resources to look at when making these types of effects for sci-fi films. After all these effects were done and the renders from Cinema 4D were done, I did a final sound design pass in Premiere. This part was actually pretty relaxing because it was much less stressful and time intensive than the other parts. It was fun finally seeing what I've created come to life. When 3D animating, you often don't see the final product that you're working with a proper render until the very end of the process because of how time intensive the renders take. And it was really cool to see how this came together. I was very happy with it. After a couple days of small revisions here and there, I finally was finished and ready to upload. The whole process from start to finish took about 2 months in total. About a month to model and animate everything, and about a month to light, texture, render, re-render, etc. Of course, with all these types of projects, it wasn't 2 months of working 40 hours a week straight. Realistically, it was really working only a few hours a day and taking some other days off to not work on projects or to work on other CK production projects. But the thing that I've learned from this 3D animated project and the last one is that it always takes longer than you think. And even so, I can't wait to get started on the next one. So if you guys like this video, be sure to smash the like button down below and be on the lookout for the next BTS video where I dive more into After Effects. Subscribe for 2 videos a week and feel free to comment down below with any other questions that you might have on this project or for 3D animation in general. With that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye everyone.